All right, so what we have today is a discussion about the Renaissance, and I want to start here on this map just to give you a frame of reference for the part of the world that our class starts on. We start around the year 1500, so Columbus has sailed and made contact in the New World. 1492 is when that first expedition happened. And so we've got the very early beginnings of European contact with the Americas. We've had ships sailing around the coast of Africa to get to Asia. So there's a lot of travel and exploration happening. But if you can see by this map, the world has not been fully realized. I'm not actually quite sure what the date is on this one. It's certainly post-Columbus. But it's also post some of the other explorers because it does have the western coasts of North and South America, the beginnings of those mapped. So it's a little bit later. But notice how you have like Antarctica going down along the south, and over on the very edge of the west, it looks like California just keeps going across the Pacific Ocean to connect to Asia, which is obviously inaccurate. And even just the general shape of things is not quite right. This is still very much so a world where everything is new. We don't really have a strong grasp of what is in our hemisphere. So just keep that as a frame of reference as we're talking about what the rest of what's going on culturally in this world. So let me change slides here. What we have for the Renaissance itself is you have new ideas, intellectual and artistic ideas, that are going to mark a transition between the Middle Ages, which was dominated in Europe by the Catholic Church and by a feudal nobility system and things like the Black Death, and you're ushering in the modern world, the world in which we live, where you're going to start to see some things, some social patterns and that sort of thing, that more reflect what we have in the Western world today. So what I have listed here in your notes is that it's from 1300 to 1700. That's a very broad basis for the Renaissance, mostly because it's not an event, right? It's not something that happens, boom, this event happened and therefore this is happening. Like, say, if you think about World War II, World War II, Hitler invades Poland, Britain and France declare war, and the world is at war, right? That's not a thing that happens in the Renaissance. It's art and it's culture and it's an evolved process. So the date range, this is a very long date range. I think maybe a more specific, you'll see people refer to it as even 1350 to 1650. Even shorter than that, some will only reference the 14th and 15th centuries, which is, of course, the 1300s and 1400s. I would extend it further than that because I think that several of the most famous Renaissance artists and authors aren't alive in this shorter one, but certainly the entirety of the 1400s and the 1500s should be included in a solid explanation of the Renaissance. It is a rebirth of classical knowledge. Now, classical knowledge is everything related to Greece and Rome. You learned about that a lot in World History 1, right? So you've got the Greeks and the Romans who would have been centered in Italy. It's a discussion in the political spheres about democracy and people's rights and that sort of thing, though no one's making sort of that transition yet. But it's also about their artistic styles and the philosophy of the Greeks and the Romans, the astronomy of the Greeks and the Romans. There's a renewed sense of purpose and a renewed interest in their science and their medicine and all of it. It's also, as I said, the birth of the modern world. It begins in Italy. Italy, as you can see on the map, is at the heart of the Mediterranean Sea. So you have this influx of learning happening in Italy because it's also the heart of trade. People are coming from Asia and Africa and Europe, and they're all coming through the Mediterranean to trade. And so when people come and trade, they also stay, and they eat in taverns, and they stay in hotels and all that stuff. And because of that, they communicate and ideas start spreading. And it's from that world that the Renaissance then takes off. This is not erasing. Well, I'm just gonna hit some undos. But it's from that world that the Renaissance is going to spread north. Moving along the trade routes back in through Europe. So it's going to move, I probably should have changed the color. I'll do a double arrow. It's going to move into England and France and what is now Germany and Scandinavia. It's going to move north through those regions as people return back to their homelands after having traded. All right. My bars are not working. There we go. 3 major artists that we need to cover: Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Dürer. Michelangelo is from Italy, as is Leonardo da Vinci, as are most of the people that you would study in like a Renaissance art class, because Italy was the heart of the Renaissance itself. And even if they weren't from Italy, they would have moved to Italy to study new techniques and be in the atmosphere of the Renaissance and that sort of thing. So for Michelangelo, we need 2 different works. The first is the Sistine Chapel. So he's commissioned by the Catholic Church to paint biblical scenes in the Sistine Chapel. And as you can see, they're very big. These are murals. But they're not just on like one wall. When you think of a mural, a lot of times you think of like the exterior of a building or something like that. But these are massive panels all the way up the walls, right up the ceiling. This is sort of behind where the pulpit would be. So there's just beautiful color and ornate detail of all these different scenes in the Bible. So it's something that he was commissioned by the Catholic Church to do. It's going to be a very parochial. You might want to jot that word down. Parochial. That's a P. Parochial. It means religious work, as are several of the ones that we're going to highlight on this page. The other most famous of Michelangelo's works is this statue of David. So it's a marble statue, of course, and it is of David from the David and Goliath story. So another parochial church associated work for Michelangelo. Next we have Leonardo da Vinci, who is famous for the Mona Lisa. You probably will recognize, what's going on here? I am struggling. No! I should have done this. I'm sitting on my couch, and I should have done this on my table where I could use my mouse instead of having to use my touchpad. That's all right. So you probably are familiar with the Mona Lisa, and there's lots of different theories. That's one thing, if you want to take a minute and research, is the various theories behind the Mona Lisa painting itself. But in the background is, of course, a lot of detail, and this is not recognized as a parochial piece. It's more of a secular piece. We don't technically know who the Mona Lisa was. There's several theories as to who she probably was. Most likely she was a member of a very wealthy family who had commissioned Leonardo da Vinci to paint a portrait of her, as lots of wealthy families would have done at the time. Poor people obviously aren't paying artists to paint pictures of them, but wealthy families certainly would have been. So that's the most obvious, most expected theory. And then he also has the Last Supper. You've also probably seen this before as well. It is, of course, depicting Jesus and the disciples the night before his crucifixion, when he does the breaking of the bread and the drinking of the wine with his disciples. So that's obviously a church piece as well. But those are the Leonardo da Vinci ones. He's incredible. He actually is called a Renaissance man, right? A Renaissance man. is Da Vinci. Not Mona Lisa, but Da Vinci. Because he was amazing. So he's not just an artist, he's an architect and an inventor and an anatomist, and he just is crazy smart. He wrote a lot of his papers that he would keep, he wrote backwards, so that you couldn't just glance at the papers and read them. The designs he built are all functional. He built a flying machine. It's literally like a helicopter, that if you build it with today's technology, it flies. And this is the like late 1400s. He's designing these things before Columbus has made contact in the New World, right? So like in Da Vinci's lifetime, I think that's important. In Da Vinci's lifetime, in Michelangelo's lifetime, in Albert Durer's lifetime, Europeans did not initially know about North and South America and vice versa, right? So that's the world that they're living in. They're living in this world where they're genuinely the entire size of the globe shifts in their lifetime, and that's a background to some of the things that they're gonna do. The other is Albrecht Dürer, who is responsible for these two, the Adoration of the Trinity and the Adoration of the Magi. Dürer is German, and he is the thing about it is that it's because he's in part of what's called the Northern Renaissance, because he's not in Italy, right? He's in the northern sections of Europe. His work is much more heavily influenced by the church than the Italian Renaissance is, which seems ironic, right? You would think that the Italians, since they're right there with the Catholic Church centered in Rome, would have the more religious ties, but they don't actually. It's the Northern Renaissance that is much more tied to that of the church and devotion to the church. So this is where we're going to take our pause, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys. If you have any questions, reach out, email, or remind, or send me a message, or however you want to contact me. Let me answer anything you have. Talk to you later. Bye.